Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're going to talk about cars today. Yep, cars and light trucks. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us and weigh in, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up and running. 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Charles in Ohio is with us. Welcome, Charles.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're all well.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I'm a bit frosted. I've been working on a bunch of different vehicles in our garage. You can call it our automotive shop. And I'm frosted because of many things. The complexity, the cost, it looks like the engineers and accountants are at war with the mechanics who work on these cars. It's getting darn near impossible to maintain vehicles. You know, you look under the hood, I just envision, okay, so guy's out on a date with his gal, and let's say he's 20 years old, and they're going somewhere or going out to dinner, and the engine sputters, he drifts over to the side, gets safely out of the way of traffic, and then what's he do next? He raises the hood in his new car, and then he goes, oh my, I'm trying to so where actually is the radiator? Where is the dipstick? Where is the battery in here? Is there a battery under this hood? Or did they put it could it be in the trunk? Could it be under the seat? Oh, wow. Nothing looks recognizable anymore. And if you can recognize it, you can't get to it. Does that seem far-fetched to you, Charles, or does it seem like it could be true?
To me, it's a plot, and exactly, it's against not only the mechanics, but every car buyer in America. Years ago, back when they removed all the hand cranks and put power windows in every car, I slowly was coming to the same conclusion as you are, that it's a two-way street. The American public does demand convenience, like the many convenience in the modern car, but Detroit's seen the value in producing a product that just is so terribly expensive and difficult to work on. And I look at even just the simple replacement of a heater core. How difficult would it be to put that where it was easily accessed? But in every vehicle, it's buried deep within the dashboard, so that it's a major expense and a lot of labor to replace the heater core. And
all right,
every
Charles,
part.
Go ahead.
Every part and every system in the vehicle is designed for maximum difficulty, and so that when the smallest thing fails, it's difficult as replacing the engine.
Okay, you hit one of my buttons, Charles. Heater core. You hit the heater core button. All right. Well, we have a bunch of Mercedes here, old Mercedes, And I actually would defend Mercedes as being the finest automobile in mass production in the world. I would defend that. I really would. So I looked up this morning, and we have to replace the heater core in our Mercedes ML 320. 320 is 3.2 liters. It's a V6. Oh, it's got, close to 300,000 miles on it. It's two-tone. It's white and rust-colored. And it's becoming more rust-colored all the time because of the road salt in Missouri. And I looked up the price of heater cores. I just went to the internet. I went to a search engine. I typed in cost to replace heater core. So the first one, I'm working on several vehicles today. I'm working on, after the broadcast, a Mercedes ML 320, which I mentioned, which is ours. We've had it for a very long time. Bought it used. We don't buy any new cars. They're all used. And so I'm working on a Mercedes ML 320, 1999 model year, a Kia Rondo, about 2006, I believe, and a Ford Escape. Okay, so the cost to replace a heater core for the Kia Rondo is $664 to $785. Now, a Kia is considered an inexpensive car, right? They're not considered, yes, okay. So $664 to $785 to replace the heater core in a Kia Rondo. Now, that's parts and labor. No tax. Taxes on top of that. Now, a Ford Escape, which is a little bit more expensive vehicle, is $534 to $933. That's parts and labor. Now, the parts cost for the heater core on the Ford Escape is $130 to $167. Now, I know that those numbers are high because I know I can get it for probably about half that. I know that. Without even looking, I know that. I don't need to replace the heater core on one, but $1,000, $933 to replace a heater core is nuts. All right. So that's a Ford Escape. Now, we're not talking about a really expensive car here. Well, it's very expensive. But in comparison to other cars, it's not really all that expensive. Now, to me, I wouldn't buy a new one. They're just too much money. But if you look at what cars cost today, it's not the highest price. It's not the lowest, but it's in the bottom third, I would think. Okay, so Mercedes ML 320, the one I actually need to replace the heater core on, $944 minimum to $2,574 to replace a heater core. Now, a heater core class is that thing that provides the heat. It's a heat exchanger. It's like a little radiator. It's like a little radiator, probably somewhere under the dash in most vehicles. And it's maybe half the size of your keyboard. A little bit thicker, but half the size of your keyboard. And it has two pipes, one inlet and one outlet that connects to the coolant that circulates in your engine cooling system. Okay? So to extract the heat out of the engine cooling system and put it inside the cab, there's this little heater core. Now, $944 to $2,574 to replace that is beyond crazy because the car's only worth $2,000. Charles, your thoughts?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like you say, it takes waste heat from the engine. That's money you're throwing away, basically, and it's a good idea to reuse it, repurpose it, turn it into cabin heat when in colder climates, and colder time of the year. And it is something that's very important for an automobile. And I very much think that the factory takes great effort to make sure that that'll last you. It'll last you beyond the warranty period. Well, usually on the average car. And like I say many times, it's there so that your Chariot turns back into a pumpkin at the assigned hour.
Yeah. And for those of you who say, geez, my car failed and, must just be me, must just be mine. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. there are plenty of failures, and you are just one. You're just experiencing one of those failures, while there are people all over the country that have the same vehicle that are experiencing the same failures at about the same age and the same mileage. No question about it. So I've done a little bit of research this morning because I'm livid, absolutely livid. Last evening, I was working on a Ford Mustang with our son, and this is like a mid-2000 model. Let's say 2009 to 2005, somewhere in there. I don't know the exact year. Nice-looking vehicle. If you tap on the front corner panel on the side, just tap on it, it has a nice ring to it. Has a ring like there's no sound deadening material in it. I guess the accountant said, that's kind of quiet. We don't need it that quiet. Let's get rid of any sound insulation spray-on material. We don't need that. Let's get rid of it. So they lightened the car by removing that. I think these accountants have promoted themselves into the enemies of the customer. I think they have, because this Ford Mustang is really cheesy. I mean, there's not much material there. The front suspension is absolutely minimum essential. And our son was doing some research, and he said, "Hey, Dad, the front suspension, the ball joint, lower ball joint, was worn out. He had to replace it. It's not his vehicle; it's someone else's." And I thought, 100,000 miles and it needed new ball joints? Come on, seriously? My Mercedes has gone 250,000 miles, and I'd be furious if I needed new ball joints. I would. I haven't replaced ball joints on a Mercedes, and we've got a bunch of them here, and they're all old. But these new American cars, oh man, they have, especially Ford. I think Ford has done an outstanding job in removing metal and removing weight and removing cost. As a matter of fact, think about this. Think about opening the hood of almost any vehicle in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. You raise the hood, and it stays up. Not a Ford Escape and not a Ford Mustang. It has a little rod that replaced the hood spring mechanism to hold up the hood. The accountants must have been under the hood saying, "We don't need no stinking springs to hold up the hood. We can put this little cheesy rod in there." No kidding. We'll be right back with Charles. I'd love to hear his comments on that. Class, Charles in Ohio is with us, and he hit my button like in the first segment and caused me to launch into this tirade about the American car companies. I just ran out during the broadcast commercial out to the yard, and there's a 1976 Ford truck there. And I raised the hood, and I looked, and I said, okay, there's the heater hoses. The heater is accessible from under the dashboard. I believe parts and labor would be about, if I were doing it and if I were charging somebody to replace the heater core, I know I can do it for under $150. I know that's what the parts. I know I could do it myself for about $50. It probably would be, if I were charging somebody, I might even be able to do it for $100, parts and labor, as compared with the Mercedes mess of, $2,500 plus dollars, or let's see, the Mercedes was $2,574 high end, and the Ford Escape was $933 high end, and the Kia Rondo $785. I'm thinking more like $100 for this Ford truck, 1976 model, because, as you said, the engineers have made this to fail on time and to be darn near impossible to fix. Charles, I'd love to hear your comments.
Exactly. I look at it, like I say, Detroit, I look at it with amazement. I give them a lot of credit because years ago when they started bringing the imports over and people were looking at price versus support, America, people threw rocks at American auto manufacturers and said they've done an awful job. Well, I looked back then and said, I think they've done an amazing job, because their job is to support the people who buy a new car every 4 years and trade in their old car, and the people who buy who end up with the used cars, they're on their own. They want their customers to be happy, and their customers are the ones that are continually buying cars and moving the company forward with sales. And that's the only people that the factory is concerned with. I looked at, because I grew up right in the era where there were two things going on that kind of shaped it, and it was coming to an end when I was coming of age, driving age. It was, one was the Volkswagen had been manufacturing their vehicles from like 1959 to 1973, and you could still interchange major parts on them. I mean, there was a long run where you could just take a fender, but the American manufacturers and around the world were looking, and they said aftermarket would step in and stamp out those parts for next to nothing. And the manufacturer couldn't make money on them after the vehicle left their facility. And so all the manufacturers, they didn't have to scratch their head long. They knew that replacement parts are can be a major part of their income. And also during that period, a small block Chevy from I'm not sure, but around 1962 up to 1970, up to near 1980, a small block was the same. Guess what? Aftermarket got in, started manufacturing blocks and heads. Well, they couldn't have that, so all the manufacturers went to a system where the engine block and the systems are changed just enough every year so that it's difficult. Don't get me wrong, they do it, but it's difficult to get them into the aftermarket system, and people have to go back to the dealership and the factory when they want replacement parts for a lot of these strange little things. I looked at younger guys. Again, some of us are in the performance cars. The younger guys come by with their 5-liter Mustangs. Well, this was a while ago. I guess we got a break coming up.
Yeah, we've got a break coming up. We'll talk about the 5-liter Mustangs, and then let's talk about headlights. Let's talk about what it costs for, the lights on the front of your car. You won't believe it. You won't believe it. Class, we'll be right back with Charles in Ohio. Charles, you're talking about 5-liter cars. Please continue.
Yeah, what this is a comparison. I was looking at some of the younger people bought by their 5 liters, and that's an old car to people now, but it's the same as the vehicles we're speaking about. The thing is, I was raised up in the 60s, and I like older performance cars, and just for comparison, the 5 liters and the newer vehicles so many of them come with these plastic tees that are in the heater core lines, and they're in the path for the hot water, and those the longevity those are going to have, they're just going to fail, is what I'm saying. They just crumble to pieces after a certain age, and the 60 vehicles the plastic wasn't used as much, and plastic is very useful in the way they engineer it. It's very durable too, but it's like the plastic intake manifolds. Ford put the composite resin intakes on a lot of their 4.6 engines, and guess what? They failed at, like you're saying, predictable intervals on vehicles. Those would split open and spew coolant all over the engine, and you had a cost of replacing that part. And when you did replace it, under most cases, that portion where the hot water traveled would be made out of aluminum now. They realized their error or that they couldn't keep their base happy, and they would have to engineer that just a little more durable to keep people from throwing rocks at them, too many rocks.
Okay. All right. So since you mentioned what Detroit is doing, class, you're probably not going to believe what I'm going to say next. Detroit has produced new vehicles. Nearly one-third of new vehicles no longer come with a spare tire as standard equipment. In 2005, about 5% of 2006, it was about 5% of the vehicles that did not come with a spare tire. Now, one-third do not come with a spare tire. So think about this. If you have an all-wheel drive vehicle, let's go back. Let's say you have a two-wheel drive vehicle, whether it's front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. If you have a flat tire and you say, you know what, the damage to the tire is so bad, I need a new tire. But both of your tires on that axle were 50% tread left in them. So they were half used up. You get a puncture, it can't be fixed, so you need a new tire. So you buy one. But if you have an all-wheel drive car and you lose one of those tires, you will have to match all four tires, so they're the same brand, make, model, and size. So you don't destroy your transfer case, which is part of the drive line. Your automobile manufacturer will tell you that you have to do that. So instead of buying one tire, now you have to buy four. I had some Kumho tires on our vehicle, all-wheel drive. It was a Mercedes. And one tire belt separated. One. I called Kumho. They said, well, you got to bring it into a certified dealer. And I said, before I do all this, before you go and take my name and number and ID and all that stuff, assuming I have half of the tread left, how much am I going to get as a credit? They said $22.50. I said, it's going to cost me more in gas to go to Springfield, Missouri, to your certified guy to tell me that he's going to give me $22.50 credit, and I'm going to have to buy four tires. Forget it. So I no longer buy Kumho, Kuhmo, tires because of a tread separation, a factory failure. I didn't do it. I didn't cause it. So now, if we talk about buying tires for a vehicle that's rear-wheel drive, and you have a failure of a tire, and you've got a Goodyear on there, you could, if you wanted to, buy a Cooper or some other brand, as long as it's the same diameter, same width, same diameter. It's not ideal, but you can do it. But you can't do it if it's all-wheel drive. You can do it if it's front-wheel drive. You can buy just one tire. But if you don't have a spare, you can't have that matching tire. Now, here's what we do. And, Charles, I'd like to hear your point of view on this. So, in the Mercedes, and we have old Mercedes. I don't know about the newest ones. And class, when I say Mercedes, you may think I'm just throwing money away. No. The latest Mercedes we bought was $500. 500.00. $500. Less than the cost of a heater core on a Kia. You got the whole car for that. And it's a 2000 model. Okay. Well, what I try to do is buy another wheel that matches the existing four wheels. And then when I buy tires, I buy five. Now I have 5 tires, and I rotate them with the spare tire in rotation, meaning I wear them all about the same amount. Then if I get an unrepairable impact to the tire, I still have a spare that I can use that's the same make, model, and about the same amount of tread left wear on it. That's what I do. I self-insure by doing that. But how are you going to do that comfortably if you don't have a spare tire in the vehicle? No place to put one. How do you fix a flat with no spare tire? Well, it's easy. You just get on your smartphone and you call the guy, whoever that may be. They send out a tow truck. And is the guy going to come with the tire that you need and change it there on the side of the road? I don't think so. I think they're going to haul you and your car into the service facility to get a new tire. And then dismount your old one, mount your new one, balance it, and then put it back on your car. What do you think about that, Charles? Do you think anything I said is not true?
No, I think you're right on the money. Yep, it's a very good idea to have that spare and to get it in the rotation and wear them because, I mean, even to get an alignment on a car, they want the tires to be the same amount of wear on them. They don't want to align it if they don't have the same amount of wear. And like you're talking about four-wheel drive, even I don't have experience with towing them, but even with getting a tow, you may have to wait for a flatbed because they can't pick up a lot of those cars from they have to pick them up a certain way and tow them in a certain fashion, or they can ruin that four-wheel drive mechanism.
You're absolutely right. And here on the farm, we have a tow dolly. Class, a tow dolly, you attach that to, the ball on your pickup truck, for example. And a tow dolly has ramps and 2 wheels, short ramps. And assuming your vehicle can be driven, you drive if it's a front-wheel drive vehicle, you drive onto the ramp, and your rear wheels are freewheeling as you tow it down the road. If it's a rear-wheel drive vehicle, you back the vehicle onto the tow dolly, and your front wheels are spinning. The idea is you do not want to drive the drive line by the wheels turning. You don't want to do that because the engine's not running, the transmission's not running, and you won't have lubrication in the transmission, and you'll destroy the transmission or the transfer case or both. And then you're looking at throw away the car. Well, we have the tow dolly because if we have a failure, we just go pick up our vehicle. Or we have a trailer, and we put the entire vehicle on the trailer so that we don't destroy it. And the time that I had a failure of my all-wheel drive Mercedes, gas-powered, years ago, we went with a trailer and picked it up. And that's what you do. That's the proper way. So if you're thinking about just simply a plain old tow truck, now you're probably going to have a flatbed. So now you're looking at a lot of money. You're looking at the towing charge of a flatbed. You're looking at that guy taking your vehicle to the tire company, the company that will put a new tire on for you. And then the guy's going to say, geez, well, you got half wear left on these tires, but we got to have them all match. And they don't make that model tire anymore. So you're in for new tires. And mountain balance charge. So what does that cost? Well, I'm pretty darn sure it's going to be about $150 per corner, $150 per wheel, plus the towing charge. But you could have avoided a lot of that if you had a spare tire and wheel that matched the car, and you had it with you, and you had a jack. Heck, I think the accountants probably took the jack out of the car, too. If you don't have a spare tire, what do you need a jack? Right?
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Now, let's talk about something else that a spare tire does. If you look in the trunk of a Mercedes, you'll find that the spare tire is flat. Okay? It is between the back seat and the back of the car. So if somebody rams into you in the back, you got even more protection from that crash by the spare tire being there. But if you don't have a spare tire, you don't have that either. Boy, Charles, I'm getting angrier by the second. And I'm not kidding. Do you disagree with any of this?
No, not at all. I agree.
Okay, let's talk more about it when we come back. Charles in Ohio. He's a gearhead, and so am I. We're going to be talking about what's wrong with cars and why you probably shouldn't buy a new one. No kidding. Charles in Ohio and I are talking about cars, and if you're listening to this, it should be an eye-opener. Because a lot of people aren't thinking about the things that we're talking about when they go and buy a new car. Isn't it cute? Isn't it cute? That Mustang is really cute. And I left a message for the person who owns that Mustang. And that message is, do not drive this car over 70 miles an hour. If you're in a crash, you're going to die. That Mustang is as cheesy and as cheap and as thin and as flimsy as they could make it. Ford, you can come after me if you want, and I dare you to prove me wrong. And it's not just the Ford Mustang. I think Ford has gone out of its way. They've done an extraordinary job to take out as many nuts, bolts, screws, fasteners, steel, and other parts from their vehicles as possible and replace as many as possible with plastic. So on the internet search, does AAA have spare tires? So you call AAA, you pay for that service, and you call them up and you think that they're going to be able to help you with your vehicle that has no spare tire. Well, here's what the internet says. AAA will not bring a spare tire. If your spare tire is flat, then they won't put it on your car. If your spare tire is flat, they won't put it on your car. They'll tow your car to a tire repair facility, and then you pay for those repairs. AAA does not have tire changing machines on the service that they bring out to you. I have not seen a tow truck with a tire changing machine and a wheel balancer and an assortment of tires on the tow truck. I haven't seen it. I don't think it's happening anytime in a city near you soon. Charles, all your comments, please.
Right, you bring up a good point, and that's probably a good opportunity for someone to build a service, because that's what we look for in America, entrepreneurs. And you're right, that's what you need. You need a replacement tire. It'd be nice if when you call them, you could tell them what vehicle and what you need. And maybe somebody will get around to that. But you're exactly right. Detroit's idea of fuel efficiency is low weight, and low weight it carries two benefits for them. They can deny you parts you need, and they can also save themselves a couple dollars. So there you go.
Colin Anthony Bruce Chapman was the head of Lotus Motor Cars in England years ago. And he had a very simple saying. He said, make it simple and then make it lighter. That's what he wanted to do. Make it simple and make it lighter. And Ford must have taken a page out of his book, except they forgot to make it simple part. They made it more complicated and they made it lighter. Charles, I have in my hands a package that a light bulb, Sylvania light bulb. My son said to me, hey, Dad, he said this yesterday, hey, Dad, have you ever heard of a light bulb part number H11B? Now, I've heard of the H7s. They're used in Mercedes. Well, an H11B, he said, Guess how much this cost with tax? I said, I don't know. He said, $26. He said, and they're really hard to find. No one wants to stock them. And they fit a Kia. So one headlight bulb for a Kia is $26. Now, of course, you don't need just one. You need four. $100 for headlight bulbs for a Kia? Think I'm kidding? That's for the cheap ones. Now, if you want bright ones, they're $62 for two of them. That's $124 for headlights for a Kia. No kidding. Charles and I'll be right back. I'd love to hear your comments about light bulbs and what they cost. Out of sight. And that's just the beginning. That's without the lenses and the reflectors. That's extra. Yeah, kind of venting about the cost of automobile ownership with newer vehicles. Absolutely out of control. Charles in Ohio's with us. And Ted in Washington. Welcome. Thank you for calling.
Hello, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, you're one of the reasons why we're doing this broadcast today. You asked for this.
I appreciate that. I just want to apologize in advance. I will have some background noise, and if that's not tolerable after a while, I can do my best to quiet it down. But I wanted to call in and talk about the Ford products.
Yeah.
I recently came across a video about the new Ford Focus RS, the Ultra Sport high horsepower turbo model, how it's highly susceptible and very prone to block. Because instead of a full block, it has cylinder sleeves. And after a certain amount of mileage, very, very young mileage, around 20,000 or so, a small 1 or 2 millimeter gap develops between the head gasket, and coolant flows between cylinders 3 and 4, 2 and 3, and eventually the engine seizes up. And if you do a search, you'll find, I think it's the second top video on YouTube about Focus RS Hydrolock. And the guy, he says, Ford had to know. And of course it's under warranty, but it's just another unfortunate lemon product, even though the RS was such high horsepower, it would even take out the Mustang, being a four-cylinder turbo model coming in the Focus line. So I just wanted to share
Charles,
that with
I'm glad you mentioned that. I've got some comments, and I'm sure Charles has some comments that have to do with horsepower to weight ratio. Charles, your thoughts?
Specifically, I wasn't familiar with this, but it brings up a couple other things that reminded me from what you were speaking of. Even the headlamps. It's the dealership. It's weird that I can only come to the same conclusion that they really do want our cars to be disposable. They want you to get rid of them at a certain amount of time. Well, one thing that Lincoln did, I guess it was around 1995, they would have in their Lincoln Mark series vehicle, they'd use a special headlamp that would take you couldn't just drop in another bulb. And see, that's a bad habit I have. I'm not a mechanic like you that keep people on the road. I work on my own vehicles for myself, and I'm basically a motorhead. I want to work on the motor. But in the other systems, they would have headlamps with, I forget what they were, but they needed a transformer to transform the voltage, so you'd have to step it up, and there wasn't enough room to just drill in a hole and drop in a 12-volt halogen bulb. It just made it so difficult. And I just seen that over and over again where at that time the most expensive cars, they made sure they would take the most expensive repairs. And in the rear braking lamps, they were using neon lights that were very, very expensive to repair in the Lincolns. And what you just reminded me of was the 648 Cadillac engine, where they would have a similar problem with their cylinders. It wasn't exactly, well, I guess it was two of them. They did have one of their aluminum motors where the cylinder liners were a problem with it. And before that, they had the 648 where those were failing at an amazing rate for people. Those were both high-end automobiles. But like I say, Vincent, you're just bringing up the fact that they're designing the Kias with everything in it so that, well, that's basically
Well, the high-intensity discharge headlights that you've been talking about have voltages around 25,000 volts just to start the xenon bulb. And xenon is spelled Xenon. Yeah, a very expensive procedure. I mean, does it make any sense? I don't think so, because headlights, heck, a 99-cent headlamp, sealed beam from the 1960s seemed to work pretty darn well in illuminating where you were going. So you're absolutely right. But, Ted, I wanted to mention something, that the cylinder liners is nothing new, okay? We've had cylinder liners.
Correct, yeah. Range Rover has that,
Yeah. We have a couple Deutz tractors, DEUTZ, from the 1980s, like mid-80s, and they have air-cooled cylinders. And you can pop out a cylinder, with a few bolts if you want to, and replace the cylinder rather than replace the engine. And we've had Alfa Romeos. We've owned Alfa Romeos, and they have cylinder liners. So, yeah, it's been around for a long time. But the point you bring up is we're putting a lot of horsepower in a small package. We're putting a lot of heat in a small package, and we're putting a lot of pressure in the combustion chamber to produce a lot of horsepower in a small package. And when you have higher pressures, you have a greater potential for leaks, starting with the leak between the cylinders, which is what you said, between the 2 and 3 cylinder. That's the leak, right? That's where it would be, right there. Yes. So that's a real problem. And so if you overheat one of these engines, you're drive in the summer, hot day, naturally you want the air conditioning on, puts more stress on the engine, puts more heat in front of the radiator. So now you have a higher potential for overheating. And if that happens and you overheat a vehicle like this, I'm pretty sure you're going to experience a head gasket leak, which is going to be a major, major repair problem. Now, if it's under warranty, it's a nuisance. If it's not under warranty, you're probably going to throw the car away.
Absolutely. Well, I also wanted to ask you really quick, have you heard about the future of windshield wipers, that they're going to be done away with, and pretty soon it'll be ultrasonic windshield?
That sounds great. So we're going to expose ourselves right in the face with ultrasonics. Is that right?
Apparently so, potentially.
So what's wrong with windshield wipers? I mean, we even have some of them on tractors, where they have cabs. They seem to work pretty well. And it used to be that for 99 cents, you could get 2 blades, 2 refills. Can't get refills anymore because they make you buy the whole wiper blade, right? Not just the refill. You used to be able to just replace the refill, keep the blade. No, I'm a little confused. It seems to me that windshield wipers are not all that sophisticated, except in the Mercedes. Mercedes has a pretty sophisticated windshield wiper. It has one windshield wiper, and it reaches across the entire windshield.
Yeah.
So that's, more sophisticated than having 2 windshield wipers, because if you have one windshield wiper, think about it, class, the windshield wiper has to stretch out to reach the sides of the windshield and then shrink down in size when it reaches the center of the windshield and then stretch back out to reach the other side. So it elongates and then it shortens and elongates and shortens in its travel across the windshield. So that's pretty sophisticated. But it's a lot. It doesn't seem like We really need to replace a technology that's simple and repairable. And heck, don't windshield wiper systems, not the blades, or the refills, if you could get them, don't they seem to last the life of the car? To me, they do. I don't know. Ted, what else is going wrong in the automotive industry?
Really quick, it reminds me of another show. Recently, it was discussed that these manufacturers, they're doing something called planned obsolescence, whether it's a decaying cell phone battery or trying to thin out weight on vehicles. Planned obsolescence is now engineered, built in.
Yes, and then, by the way, Ted, that's been around for a long time. I've heard the term planned obsolescence in the late 70s, maybe. So it's been around for a long time. Manufacturers have figured out that, even the light bulb industry. When General Electric was making light bulbs in the 1920s, if a company came out with a light bulb that would last longer than what they thought the average life expectancy of a light bulb would be, they would destroy that competitor. I'm talking about General Electric. They wanted you to replace light bulbs. They wanted you to build a higher mountain in the landfill. That's what they wanted. And you're absolutely right. It's been around for a long time.
Fortunately, this is very rare, but there are some domestic manufacturers that are in a completely different industry, not an automotive industry. They also have the KISS method, but instead of keep it simple, stupid, they have it keep it simple and serviceable for future technicians to work on their products, to have ease of access to the equipment, whether it's a hydraulic cylinder or some type of potentiometer. It's keep it simple and serviceable rather than the mockery of keep it simple, stupid.
Ted, you bring up an excellent point. I was on the phone. Guineith called me, and I was under the hood of a car in the garage. And
I love
Guineith
her.
Isaacs called me from Australia. Me too. Well, she calls me at home almost every day, and or at least every other day. And I was under the hood of the car, and I said something that I've never said before. I said, Guineith, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I'm bleeding. I've been working. I was talking to her under the car, when I was under the hood, and on speakerphone, and I was bleeding from cutting myself from the non-serviceable areas of this particular car. All I was doing was changing spark plugs, and I was sliced up. And I'm looking at my arms right now. I've got all these wounds from just changing spark plugs. It's the manufacturer has all these sharp edges. It's like, we don't need to fix those. Who's going to be? Oh, it's our mechanics. We don't have to worry about them. We hate our mechanics anyway. So let's slice them up.
We'll use a robot, an AI, to put these things together on an assembly line.
Yes. Ted, do you have more comments for us?
I just had one more comment on the other side.
Yeah, please hold through the break. Ted in Washington, Charles in Ohio, and Vincent. Yeah, we're a bunch of gearheads talking about automobiles. Ted in Washington, Charles in Ohio, and I'm in Missouri. Ted, please continue with your thoughts.
Thank you so much. I, too, am a gearhead, likewise. But I wanted to share with the class, recently I got lucky on eBay. I was able to purchase a pair of LED headlights. It was either between $10 or $15. It's been a while, but surprisingly, the ratings were pretty accurate. They're a knockoff, some kind of no-name brand, but a high output, high lumens, and I was very, very pleased. And the brand names keep changing, but the takeaway strategy is if you trust the ratings from the users that have bought many different kinds, and eventually you'll get burned, but if you do some due diligent research, you'll come across some pretty decent products out there. So for the price of less than $15, free shipping, depending on the brand and where the seller is located, you can get a long-lasting, decent, high-quality product, quote-unquote, to give you more light lumen output down the highway. And I can testify to that. It really does work. I got burned a couple of times, which is true. But eventually I found something decent, and I keep going back to get more of the same, whether it's H11, like you were saying earlier, without the B, or H7, or 9004, 9007. It's pretty much plug and play. you might have to modify that black retaining ring to the headlight assembly. You might have to cut a little trough, maybe use a heat gun to stretch it out a little bit to fit over the keyways, the channels. But you can make it work just fine, and it really does work. So that's an idea for the class to try.
Great idea, and that's different from when LED bulbs first came out. They did not have any resistance in them, and what would happen is they would just consume and consume and consume current until they burned up. Yeah. So, these 50,000-hour LEDs, when they first came out for automobile use, would last maybe 3 minutes, maybe 1 minute. But you're absolutely right, and they have improved them. Very good point.
Thank you. And then just one other item is I suggest it's very simple, very affordable. Everybody should keep in the trunk of their car one of those hole plug worm kits. You can get them very inexpensively, pretty much any store, $5 to $10. Because most flats are because of punctures, not of severe blowouts. And you can still bail yourself out on the road. The screwdriver and the slotted bit, you insert a little gummy worm in there, and at least it'll buy you some time, some mobility from the tire instead of complete total loss. I have that in every car. I even take souvenir pictures.
Okay, and what you're talking about is a tire plug kit. And yes, you can buy them. You can buy them at the Chinese factory outlet, less than $10. They keep changing their brand. Sometimes it's Slime, sometimes it's Victor, sometimes it's something else. But you'll get these. They look like pipe cleaners.
Those are the precise brands, Victor and Slime, absolutely.
And they're kind of a gooey, rubbery thread type device, thinner than the diameter of a pencil, and you get two tools with it. One tool is like a needle, if you will, that you thread the tire plug through, and then the other is kind of like a file to ream out the hole a little bit. And yes, you can patch it. You need one more thing, and we bought these at the Chinese tool outlet, and we have them in all of our cars. I haven't tested them, but they're in there. My fault for not testing them. Those are little air compressors. So in my truck, I actually have a small Campbell Housefield airless compressor. I don't like it, but sometimes on the farm, I've got to go fill up a tire, and I have an inverter that I use to convert 12 volts DC to 120 volts AC. And I plug in this, household mini compressor, and I can inflate tires. So, but you can get a 12-volt one at the Chinese tool outlet for about $10. Now, for $20, there you go. And do you have one of those cigarette lighter Harbor Freight style air compressors?
I do. I forgot if it's actually slimy. It comes with pretty much everything, an extended hose, a little bag, carrying case. But, of course, you always have to leave the engine running as you use that because it puts a hydro on the battery.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very good. Ted, thanks so much for calling in.
Thank you for taking my call today. All the best. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, all the best. That was Ted in Washington. Charles and I are going to come back. And, Charles, I've got a question for you. So a car won't start, and think of it like a 1960s model. Car won't start. What do you do? What are the first things that you check in a 1960s model? And then we'll contrast that with a new car. And then what happens? We'll be right back. Okay, so last Friday in the month, October 26th, if you'd like to meet Mike Ma, we may have a workshop. If there's enough of us who would like to attend, I would be there. It'd be in Springfield, Missouri. It'd be a workshop on three-man militias, how to set one up, how to expand it, what to do. All your questions and answers will be provided. And we're thinking that it'll include dinner. It'll be about $50, dinner included. Are you interested in spending an evening with Mike Ma? That would be October 26th, Springfield, Missouri. We haven't fleshed out the details yet because we don't know if there's enough interest. If there is, we'll have it. If not, we won't. And how do you let us know? Well, contact me at instructor@usapreparedness.com, instructor@usapreparedness.com. Indicate your interest and your telephone number so we can contact you, and we'll let you know if it's going to happen or not. Okay? That's email instructor@usapreparedness.com. So Charles is with us in Ohio. So Charles, let's say you have a 1960s vehicle, and you go to start it, and it won't start. As a gearhead, what would you do? And I want to contrast that with my experiences with this Ford Escape, which I am learning to despise.
Exactly. On a 1960s vehicle, it just depends. Okay, I sit down in the seat and I turn the key, and I go from there. What is happening and what isn't happening? If it's cranking, if the engine is turning over and it's not starting, then I'm going to examine it to see, is there gasoline? Or what I'll do, I'll lift the hood, open up the air cleaner, and stick my finger down in the venturi, or as close as I could get it, or look in there and hit the accelerator pump and see if there's gas priming the engine. If there's gas there, that's one thing down. Second thing, I want to take and put possibly a screwdriver into the plug boot, or push the plug boot back, which you could do with those vehicles, and crank it over and see if it's got a spark jumping. And then you got two basic things taken care of there that mostly engine, even with if it back in the 60s, which was common, if your nylon gear had wore out and it jumped timing, it would still run to some degree very badly, depending on how far it moved, but it could still even start. So you have to go from there. Even if you have spark, you have to examine that it's strong enough and at the correct time. But it is a pretty simple, straightforward process. If it isn't even turning over at all, then you'll look at your starter. You could suspect your solenoid or in your Bendex. Is it pulling in, and is it engaging and sending the voltage down there? You want to make sure your voltage to the starter is getting down there, and your voltage for the ignition switch is getting to your solenoid or starter. So it just made it so easy. Stuff was accessible then to a greater degree than it is now. It was just easy and simple. And no, Detroit didn't like that. The computer industry draw parallels all the time. They have trained us to want to throw away that computer every 6 months, and they in the auto industry seen how profitable that was, or already knew, and they do the same thing to us. Well, we can't leave them keep that. Get a new one.
Okay, you're absolutely right. So those are the exact steps that I would have taken if I had a car that wouldn't start. Well, so we've got this Ford Escape, and it won't start. 2003 model V6, 3 liter. It's 15 years old. Okay, it will crank, So what I did was we have an OBD2 scanner. That's on-board diagnostics, Roman numeral 2, so it's a Series 2. And you can get them for about $38 on eBay. And if you have a newer vehicle, 1996 or newer, there's a port, an onboard diagnostics port. You plug in this scanner, and it will read some codes and tell you what the computer thinks might be happening. Kind of simple. Well, in the case of this Ford Escape, what I did, in the case of the Ford Escape, I plugged it in, and the scanner could not communicate with the computer. And so I checked the fuel pressure. Now, that's really easy. All you have to do is plug in a fuel pressure gauge into a port that's designed for testing. But Ford and the accountants and the engineers are war with the mechanic, so you have to take off part of the intake system, the air intake system, and you have to take off some bracketry because you can't get your hand in there to access this commonly used fuel pressure diagnostic port. Okay, so I took these parts off, and I've got fuel pressure. Okay, and of course I checked the spark. I removed these are the ignition coils on the spark plugs, and I got some spark plugs, and yep, sure enough, I've got spark. Then I took out the spark plugs, looked at them. They looked okay, not great, but okay. And So those were the tests that, the simple tests. Do we have fuel? Do we think it's being delivered to the intake system? Do the mechanics of the engine sound about right? Is it cranking, indicating that there's compression in the cylinders? Yeah, we had all that. Well, after a few days of fighting with this thing, I decided to call the dealer. And I said, here's what's going on. They said, well, could be the computer. And a PCM. And I said, so if I wanted to buy one from you, how much would it be? Well, $600 to $1,500. But we're going to charge you between $100 and $170 to diagnose the problem. Now, if it is the computer, we'll have to program the computer so that it's integrated with the other computers on this Ford Escape. And you've got the keys, right? No, I only have number 1 key. I don't have the number 2 key. Okay, so we'll have to sell you a set of keys. You'll need the number 1 and the number 2 key, so that the key will communicate with the computers, so that you can start the car. Otherwise, if you don't have the keys programmed to the computer, you will not be able to start your car. So now we have the theft system, the computer, all tied together, and they need to be communicating with the other computers on the car. So now we have a $2,000 fix that you can hold in your hand, small parts, 2 keys, and a computer, and the installation and the diagnostics, a $2,000 fix on a $2,000 car. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Now, that's assuming that everything else is, working on the car, like good tires and everything else. So what has happened is the value of these cars, simple air conditioning not working, oh man, who wants that? Who wants a car that doesn't have air conditioning working? That destroys the value of a car. If the car won't start, most mechanics can't figure out what to do. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. And this is a Ford Escape that if you want to change the spark plugs, it's really, really simple to change 3 of them, but it has 6 of them. The first 3 you can see, just pop the hood. It doesn't have the hood spring, so you have to use that prop rod to hold the hood up. And then you can use a standard spark plug wrench with an extension and a ratchet. And after you take the coil packs off, you can remove the spark plugs. The front 3. The rear 3 are buried under the intake manifold. You literally have to take off the air intake system, bracketry, the system that controls the acceleration, a bunch of hoses, and the intake manifold. And when you do that, you're going to need a whole new gasket set for the intake manifold to change the rear 3 spark plugs. Charles, I'm not kidding.
Oh, I don't doubt it a bit. That's what they're doing. And me being a conspiracy buff, I see, and the amount of patents I've looked at in the past, I've seen like original patents for back when they were back in the 50s, when they first started trying to develop the catalytic converters. Different manufacturers got patents for them, and just looking at that, knowing that there were choices back then as a solution for the air quality and air pollution problems that these vehicles would make, it just seems to me they've known from that time to now which direction they wanted to take us. Not in the best direction for us, in the best direction for them. And they've done studies, and they look at younger people, and they know that most young people have seen us suffer with these vehicles, whereas our parents could generate enough income to build a home, household, and maintain a vehicle. Now people can't pay for anything, and young people coming up have no interest in owning a car. And the manufacturers, I believe, kind of like that. They're aiming their future at leasing cars to larger companies and Uber-like concerns, so that it's consolidation. And I see our government as participating and that's why they keep it to the big three. And I was shocked when they let Tesla in, but I think they know they can control and put that under their umbrella, and they influence and control all of the manufacturers anyway. Now, I agree with you. They're making it as difficult as possible. Now, they have a key to every car manufactured in America. They can cut it off when they want to, and now have access to travel, which is, in my youth, when I was coming up, that was one thing I always saw, that there was maybe Hogan's Heroes and Robin Hood shows, which I wasn't interested in, but the bad guy would always say, "Where are your papers?"
Well, we've got Mark the Spark holding in Pennsylvania, and we'll be right back. And, so how much does it cost to replace these spark plugs on the Escape? Up to $186 for $18 worth of spark plugs. No kidding. $186. Charles is with us in Ohio. Mark the Spark in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Vincent. Hello, Charles. I know we've got to go real quick here. What's going on is this is mercantilism. So people want to look that up. Basically, where we don't own or can really control what the durable goods. I think that cars are I think they're falling in the category of durable goods. Well, they're no longer durable, and they're not any good. So they're not much good. I think the best designs are simple, that are durable. In terms of Ford products, I think that Henry Ford wanted to make a working man's car for the working man who could work on his own car. But then when the corporatists, when he started fading, got older, the corporatists snuck into the board and took over Ford, and they had a better idea. The better idea was to, sell you a bunch of parts, redesign things every few years so you couldn't keep up with it. Your local mechanic can't keep up with it because of control circuitry. Now we have control circuitry. The test equipment that they have to update it every several years. It costs like $5,000 to $10,000 just to update your test equipment to keep up with all that technology. Who needs it? We don't need it. I don't know if you've ever, I put in a plug here for a few companies that I've dealt with that I'm not selling anything. But rockauto.com is a good place to get parts for really cheap.
Okay, hold it right there. Yes, and no. We buy parts from Rock Auto. If their listing is accurate, yes, it's a good place. But if their listing is inaccurate, there is no one that you can talk to. Okay, you can call them and say, yes, you've got to communicate.
I do understand that.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
We buy a lot of parts from Rock Auto, and
they're very
got
good.
a love-hate relationship.
Especially the paper products. By the way, paper products across the board. Your toilet paper down to your air filters in your car and all this stuff. There's a tremendous markup. So you can save a lot of money on air filters, oil filters. Get quality parts to Rock Auto for like 1/2 to 1/3 to 1/2 the cost, even at your local Chinese factory outlet, Walmart. Anyway, another product, you're talking about the cooling system. Jay Leno, and I watch Jay Leno's Garage. I don't know if you watch it. And I know Jay Leno's he's a multi-millionaire, and he buys all these cars, old classics, and all this. He uses a waterless coolant, and I don't remember the name of it, but there's a waterless coolant or two out there on the market. You see, the thing about water is when it turns to steam, it expands 13 times its volume. That's a very destructive force, or it could be a powerful force if you put it in a steam locomotive. But in a system where it's a captured system, airtight system, it'll explode. So it destroys. So if you can go to waterless for a vehicle, of course it's a little bit upfront investment, but for a vehicle you want it to last. My take on Mercedes is that the older Mercedes were simple genius. I was really shocked when I first worked on an 80s series. replace the brakes, the disc brakes on the rear. They were so simple. They were simpler than any disc brakes I'd ever seen. I could do it in 5 minutes per side. I mean, it's
literally 5 minutes.
Yeah. But now the newer ones, I haven't worked on the newer ones, but even back to the old VW Beetle Bug, I had one of those, and it was genius how the belt tightening system worked. It was just simple, and it was genius.
Right.
Of course, whenever Mercedes bought into Chrysler, the reason why they did that is they wanted to get in on the world market, the world marketing idea, so where they could sell parts, I guess. That didn't work out too well for them, but they did, they were going, my sense of it is Mercedes, BMWs, and the good German makes have gone to the idea of obsolescence too. Maybe not as far as Detroit, but they're working on that. So I say an older vehicle that's a durable design and has metal parts in it, as many as you can find. I just like that. And my concern about this, Vincent and Charles, is the single parent, the single female parent, who, the single mother, she doesn't see what's coming. And anyway, I'll leave it at that.
That's what this broadcast. That's what Mark. Thank you for calling. And that's what this broadcast is about. It's about opening your eyes. That single mother that Mark is talking about, who has no idea what to do when she opens the hood because no one's told her, she's in for shock, absolute shock, because she's not going to be able to fix it. Why? Headlamps. If you want to replace the lenses and the bulbs on a Kia, $570 for 2 headlamps, the package, and the bulbs.